Hey guys, it's Tuesday, September 22nd, and yesterday we started ancient Greece, and I talked about its geography and Mycenae, the first Greek city-state, and the Dark Ages, which again weren't dark for them, just dark for us because they didn't record a lot of stuff because they hadn't adopted the Phoenician alphabet yet. And then we started getting into kind of how their city-states were ran, first with tyranny, and then that kind of fell out of favor. And they moved, depending upon the city-states, to different forms of government. Athens, of course, very famously moved to democracy and is one of the greatest lasting legacies of ancient Greece. But today we're actually talking about Sparta, and their form of government was an oligarchy, which, if you'll remember from yesterday, is actually a small group of people running the government. So Sparta is always one of those like hot civilizations that a lot of students really like to learn about and talk about. And of course, it stems predominantly from the movie 300. It's I am Sparta, and he knocks the guy into the chasm with his leg. Whilst Hollywood and their airbrushing did a pretty cool job with that movie, the realities of living in ancient Sparta were pretty rough and tumble. It's definitely one of those civilizations that I would not want to go back to and live within. And after today's little talk and the video that I want you to watch, you'll probably, hopefully, feel the same way. So there is basically one word that sums up Sparta, and that is war. It is all they talked about, thought about, educated themselves on, trained for. It was literally eat, sleep, breathe, warfare and military training. Sparta actually means highly self-disciplined. And the deal is, all right, case in point, you're born in Sparta. You're a baby, just born. All children, all infant babies, were subjected to a test, basically. And that was they were presented to the Council of Elders. These elders were known as ephors. That's actually in red there on your slide. And they were a part of the oligarchy, a part of like the ruling class of the government. And they would look at these infants to determine if there was any weakness whatsoever, male and female. Of course, they were being much more like rigid with, the male children, infants, but females were also subjected to this. If there was any kind of obvious weakness or deformity, then yeah, they were definitely cast out. And I'll explain what that means here in a minute. But if even there was a perceived weakness by the elders, maybe the kid cried all the time and, could never be consoled and, had just, could never seemingly be pacified. That could be viewed as weakness. And so what would happen if the child was, deemed unfit for Spartan society is they were exposed. And exposure of infants was actually a pretty common practice in the ancient world. It wasn't only the Spartans that practiced exposure. And this is when a baby was taken oftentimes to a sacred site. They believed that these hills or these sites were connected closer to the gods and goddesses. And they would just basically leave the baby to be taken by the gods and goddesses. But of course, we know now that just simply means they sat there and screamed and starved themselves to death or were, taken by predators. There were times that some of the locals would go to those places and take in some of the babies. But, like I told my students in class today, I know that it sounds horribly inhumane to us today, like, oh my gosh, how could you do that? And it does. It hurts my mama heart. I can promise you that, to think about a little baby being exposed to death. But you have to consider, babies that potentially were born with like cleft lip and palate, and they couldn't, like suckle on their mom and eat. And there were no surgeries to fix things like that, and so they were going to like die regardless. And so the exposure on these sacred hillsides and such were actually viewed as the best thing for the kid. And it was like, where I'm giving you to the gods, and so that's the best place, that's the best I can do for you, because you're going to die anyway. Now, Sparta, on the other hand, was, again, a lot more rigid. Kids that really sometimes were perfectly healthy were exposed just due to perceived weakness. So Sparta was much more, cruel, I guess you could say, or, it was a lot harder to pass the infant test in Sparta. But, okay, you make it past that, right? If you were a girl, you stay at home until you're married. But if you are a boy, at the age of 7, you are no longer your parents' kid. You are owned by the state of Sparta. And you go into military training at 7 years of age. And it is not easy, guys. I'm talking, it is, you are starved pretty regularly. You, of course, a day in, day out. It is, if you are not physically being trained for warfare, you are mentally being trained for warfare. You are emotionally being trained for warfare. And again, I really, you online learners, y'all got to watch this video that I have embedded into this slide. Into the next slide. It's about 11 minutes, and it really goes into detail about Spartan life and what it was like to train. And you'll see, just again, how rough it was. And, they were made to fight each other, sometimes to the death. So they knew, what it took to really, fight like that. Again, kept on the edge of starvation. Never allowed to wear shoes. God forbid you were fat or overweight in any form or fashion. You were perceived as then weak and body shamed and sometimes even beaten. And so it was, again, a very hardcore society. They were educated. They could read, they could write. And ladies, those of you listening online, to be a female in the ancient world and live in Sparta, actually, if you could kind of get past the just the overall culture, you had more rights than pretty much any other females of that time frame. Spartan women were highly respected, highly revered. And of course, it's because without women, there is no army. There are no warriors. We are the vessels that breed the warriors. So women were, again, highly respected. They were able to own property. They were educated. They could read. They could write. Of course, no philosophy, no literature, no art. It's all war-based, even for the women. Even the women were taught war tactics and strategy. But yeah, women, you could own property. You could even voice political opinion, which you want to talk about unheard of in the ancient world. In the ancient Greek world, in other city-states. And, overall, you were also physically trained and expected to exercise and be physically fit because, of course, they believed that the better physically fit the mother, the more physically fit the babies. But you lived at home with your parents, girls, until you got married, and then, but even then you may still live with his parents, if I remember correctly, I don't know, I can't remember how that worked. Maybe you got your own place. But anyways, once you got married, boys, you could not live with your wives until you were 30. You actually had to remain in the military barracks to, really focus in on training. Now, you could go and visit your wife because, hello, babies, but they wanted more babies and more warriors, but you couldn't actually live with your wife until you were 30. Another thing is that foreigners were not allowed to come into Sparta. Spartans were really not allowed to travel outside of Sparta. And of course, this is to keep them, in line and in the bubble of warfare as culture, as a dominant everything. You go out and let's say you travel to Athens and you see all of this art and philosophy and democratic culture and lifestyle, then you might think, ooh, this is so nice. And, we can't be having that in Sparta. It's war, more war, and war some more. So, very, very rigid, not only culture but social structure. And, that's all it focused in on. So, this video, again, about Spartan life is about 11 minutes. And I'd really, again, I want you guys at home to watch this. And that's really it for Sparta. We're going to get into Sparta more when we talk about the Peloponnesian War, and there'll be like a little activity on Athens and Sparta at the beginning of next week. And don't forget, your formative assessment is also on Friday, which is about Athens and Sparta. So don't think this is it. If you're kind of like, man, that's it. So anyways, but that's it for today. And tomorrow is a teacher work day for the social studies department. So y'all won't be getting a video from me tomorrow because I'll be my head down working on stuff all day. But on Thursday, we'll be going over Athens, and you'll be getting a video from me then. And you still, of course, are responsible for completing your bell ringers. So that's it for today. And I will see you guys on Thursday. Bye.